What happens when a man in coveralls is turned away from a luxury restaurant just because of how he looks? Can a simple act of disrespect be turned into a lesson for an entire establishment? When Marcus Thompson faces judgment, he doesn't raise his voice, but one call will change everything. Curious to know how? Watch now, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Marcus Thompson's auto repair shop sat nestled in the bustling heart of Chicago's West Loop, a neighborhood where old warehouses and industrial spaces had been transformed into trendy lofts and bustling businesses. The shop was modest, a far cry from the sleek storefronts around it, but it stood out in its own quiet way. The faded red brick building, with its hand-painted sign reading Thompson's Auto Repair, held a kind of charm, rustic, unpretentious, and dependable. Inside, the smell of motor oil and metal mixed with the faint scent of coffee from an old drip machine sitting in the corner. The hum of machinery and the clink of wrenches against metal were constant sounds, the rhythm of hard work that defined Marcus's life. Marcus wasn't the type to make noise. He wasn't interested in running a flashy business or drawing attention. His customers came because they knew the value of reliability. He could fix anything that had wheels, from old sedans to the most pristine luxury cars. His reputation spoke for itself. People trusted him, not just because he knew what he was doing, but because he was honest. He'd charge fairly and always told you exactly what was wrong with your car, no sugar coating. If you needed a repair, he'd tell you. If it wasn't worth fixing, he'd let you know and wouldn't charge you for it. That kind of integrity was rare in his line of work, but it was what had earned him the respect of the people around him. On this particular morning, however, Marcus wasn't thinking about engines or oil changes. Today was for him and his wife, Tamara. She had been hinting for weeks about wanting a proper lunch date, something away from the noise of the shop and the routine of their daily lives. After all these years of working hard, Marcus knew she deserved it. She'd always supported him, standing by him through the long hours, the broken tools, and the never-ending cycle of repairs. He knew it had been too long since they had a moment just for themselves. She had heard about a new French restaurant in the Gold Coast, Le Beau, and was eager to try it. "It's been forever since we went somewhere nice," she had said more than once. Marcus glanced at the clock on the wall, noting that it was already past noon. He had meant to get away earlier, but a tow truck had brought in an old Cadillac that needed an emergency fix, and he couldn't bring himself to turn it away. He wiped his oil-stained hands on an old rag and glanced down at his worn coveralls, faded with a few grease stains near the pockets. The thought of going to a fancy restaurant looking like this made him chuckle. But Tamara had made it clear. It was time for a change of pace. With a quick wash of his face and a few spritzes of water through his hair, he was ready, albeit a little out of place. As he locked up the shop and climbed into his truck, Marcus couldn't help but smile. He was looking forward to a quiet lunch with his wife, away from the endless grind of the shop. But little did he know, this simple lunch date would soon become anything but ordinary. Marcus and Tamara pulled up to Le Beau, the renowned French restaurant nestled in Chicago's upscale Gold Coast neighborhood. The restaurant exuded an air of elegance from the moment they approached, its sleek glass doors reflecting the chic, urban skyline. The white tablecloths inside were immaculate, the soft hum of classical music drifting through the air. The place was a picture of refinement, frequented by the city's elite, wealthy professionals and socialites who seemed as polished as the marble floors beneath their feet. Marcus, still in his worn coveralls, felt out of place standing in front of the pristine building. He glanced at Tamara, who, dressed in a soft blue dress with her hair elegantly pinned back, looked every bit the part. She smiled at him reassuringly, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they didn't quite belong in such a setting. Still, he had promised her this, a chance to enjoy a day off from the usual grind. He parked his truck, a weathered Silverado that had seen more years of hard labor than any luxury car in the lot, and they made their way inside. The hostess, a young woman with tight, pulled-back hair and a nervous smile, looked up as they entered. Her gaze immediately fell on Marcus. She took in the oil-stained coveralls, his scuffed work boots, and the faintest traces of grease under his fingernails. A brief flicker of judgment crossed her face before she spoke. "Hi, can I help you?" she asked, her voice light, but her posture was rigid. "I have a reservation," Marcus replied with a smile, feeling slightly uneasy. "Thompson for two." The hostess looked him over again, her eyes lingering just a moment too long before she leaned forward slightly. "Are you here to make a delivery?" she asked, her tone dismissive. Marcus blinked in surprise, his smile faltering for a second. "No, ma'am, I'm here to eat." He paused, offering a reassuring glance at Tamara, who was already looking uncomfortable. The hostess hesitated, then her eyes shifted to the reservation book, though her fingers never quite touched the page. "Well," she said, "we do have a dress code and—" "I'm afraid you don't quite fit the image." Her words hung in the air, and before Marcus could respond, she added, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Tamara's face reddened in shock, her hand instinctively reaching for Marcus. But Marcus didn't say a word. He turned to Tamara, giving her a soft, almost apologetic smile. Without raising his voice or causing a scene, he quietly said, "Let's go, baby." As they walked back to the door, the feeling of humiliation pressed heavily on him, not because of the rejection, but because of the judgment that had been cast on him before he even had the chance to speak. It wasn't his words, his actions, or his attitude. It was the way he looked. Marcus didn't say a word as he walked through the door, his boots echoing on the polished marble floor. Tamara was right behind him, but he could feel the heat of her embarrassment radiating from her. Neither of them spoke as they made their way back to the truck, the cool air outside offering no relief from the warmth of frustration building in Marcus's chest. As he started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, the silence between them was thick. Marcus stared ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He didn't say anything to Tamara. There wasn't really anything to say. She had seen it too, the way the hostess had looked him over, the way she had sized him up without even blinking. He wasn't surprised, not really. This was the way the world worked, wasn't it? People like him didn't belong in places like that, no matter how hard they worked, no matter how much they achieved. It was the unspoken rule, and Marcus had been living by it for as long as he could remember. But that didn't mean it didn't sting. The truth was, it hurt more than he cared to admit, and it wasn't just about the rejection. It was about the way he had been dismissed, as if his worth could be summed up by the dirt on his hands, the scuff of his boots, the oil stains on his clothes. Tamara broke the silence first. Her voice was soft but steady. "I can't believe they did that." Marcus exhaled slowly, trying to push the anger down. "It's fine," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "It's just the way it is." Tamara looked at him, her eyes filled with sympathy. She knew he was hurt, but she also knew he wasn't going to let it show. He never did. After a moment of quiet, Marcus turned the truck down a side street, toward a small diner they both loved. Nothing fancy, but a place that always felt like home. "Let's just eat somewhere simple," he said, his voice returning to its usual calm. Tamara nodded, grateful for his quiet strength, but knowing that beneath it all, Marcus carried a weight heavier than anyone could see. As Marcus and Tamara settled into the worn booth at the diner, the hum of the small space around them seemed almost comforting after the tension they'd just left behind. The clatter of dishes and soft murmurs from other patrons filled the air, grounding them in the simple peace of their regular spot. Marcus wasn't hungry, but the familiar scent of bacon and coffee made him feel a little more at ease. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling of injustice. It wasn't just the rejection. It was how easily they'd dismissed him, how quickly they'd assumed they knew who he was based on his appearance alone. He thought of the hostess's gaze, the way she looked at him as if he were out of place, and he was tired of letting these moments slide without doing something about them. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, scrolling to Evan Carter's contact. Evan wasn't just a wealthy investor in the auto industry. He was a friend, a man who'd helped him out of tight spots before. And right now, Marcus needed to let him know what had happened, not to complain, but to inform. He tapped the call button. "Evan," Marcus said when his friend picked up, his voice steady but tight. "It's Marcus. I need a minute of your time." Evan's voice boomed over the line, full of energy and curiosity. "What's going on, man?" Marcus explained the situation, how they'd been turned away from LeBeau because of his appearance despite having a reservation. He kept his tone calm, factual, not wanting to sound like he was looking for sympathy. There was a pause on the other end. Then Evan's voice dropped, tinged with fury. "They did what to you?" Marcus sighed. "Yeah. But I'm not calling to cause trouble. Just thought you should know." "I'm on my way," Evan said firmly. "You stay there." Evan didn't just make a call to the restaurant. He drove directly to LeBeau, his Porsche cutting through the city streets, the engine purring like a beast ready to strike. He wasn't going to let this slide. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, the manager, Brad, had just returned from his lunch break and was already preparing excuses when Evan walked through the door. "Mr. Carter," he greeted, though his smile faltered as he recognized the man who had once made significant investments in the restaurant's expansion. Evan didn't waste time. "I'm here to talk about a reservation you turned away today," he said, his voice flat. Brad raised an eyebrow, attempting to play it off. "Oh, there was some confusion." "We do have a dress code, you know." Evan leaned in, his tone icy. "No, you have a judgment problem. The man you turned away, Marcus Thompson, is the one who keeps my cars running. If you think someone like him doesn't belong here, we have bigger problems." Brad's face froze and his shoulders stiffened. He quickly backpedaled, trying to smooth things over. "Of course, Mr. Carter, I'm sure there was just a misunderstanding." "I'll personally—" "Not good enough," Evan interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "You'll fix this, but I'm going to make sure you understand just how big of a mistake you've made today." It wasn't just a call anymore. Evan wasn't just going to let this slide. The reality of what Marcus had experienced was about to come crashing down on the restaurant, and Evan was ready to make sure they felt the weight of it. Evan Carter stepped into LeBeau with a clear purpose, his stride firm and confident. His Porsche parked outside seemed to stand in stark contrast to the restaurant's opulence, setting the tone for what was about to unfold. As he entered, the soft murmur of conversations quieted, eyes subtly shifting toward him as he approached the hostess station. Chloe, the same young hostess who had turned Marcus away earlier, visibly stiffened when she saw Evan. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice wavering, "how can I help you?" "I need to speak with the manager," Evan said, his tone unyielding. Chloe nodded quickly, scurrying off to fetch Brad. Brad, the manager, emerged shortly, wearing a strained smile that barely concealed his discomfort. "Mr. Carter, what a surprise. How can I assist you today?" Evan wasted no time. "I'm here about Marcus Thompson. You turned him away earlier. I want to know why." Brad attempted to deflect, offering a quick explanation. "There was a misunderstanding. He didn't meet the dress code," Evan's voice cut through. "This isn't about a dress code, it's about respect. Marcus is a respected professional. You judged him based on his appearance, and that's not acceptable." The tension in the air was palpable as diners in the restaurant began to sense the shift. Evan's voice grew sharper, demanding not just an apology but a systemic change. "I'm asking for more than a token apology. Retrain your staff. Teach them humility. Teach them to value people for who they are, not just what they look like. Brad, realizing the gravity of the situation, nodded reluctantly. Understood, Mr. Carter. We'll make the changes. Marcus and Tamara sat quietly in the diner, their food now cold but the warmth between them still comforting. The clatter of plates and the casual chatter of patrons created a peaceful backdrop, far removed from the tension of the high-end restaurant. Marcus glanced at Tamara, a small smile tugging at his lips, but there was no need for words. They didn't need the validation of LeBeau or anyone else. Here, in this humble diner, they found everything they needed: peace, comfort, and each other. It was a reminder for Marcus that his worth, and the worth of everyone around him, wasn't defined by other people's assumptions or judgment. He didn't need to be seated at a fancy table to feel respected. Days later, LeBeau reached out, offering a scripted apology and a free meal as a gesture to make amends. Marcus listened to the voicemail and deleted it without responding. A free meal wouldn't erase the damage done. What he needed wasn't an apology dressed up in corporate language. It was the kind of respect that couldn't be bought or offered with hollow words. He had earned that respect, and he didn't need it from a restaurant that didn't understand its true meaning. The drive home was quiet, the hum of the engine the only sound between Marcus and Tamara. The city lights flickered in the rearview mirror as they left the Gold Coast behind, and it seemed as if the weight of the day began to settle more heavily on Marcus's shoulders. He had kept his emotions in check during their dinner, but now, in the quiet of the truck, he felt the sting of what had happened earlier. "Tamara," he said softly, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "It's not just about that restaurant, it's everything, you know. It's like no matter how much work I put in, no matter how much I try to do right by people, it's always about how I look, how I dress, what they think I am." Tamara didn't answer right away. She understood she had always understood. His struggles, the long hours at the shop, the sacrifices, the way people saw him as just a mechanic, nothing more. Marcus took a deep breath, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "I've spent my life building something from nothing, working harder than anyone, yet they still look at me like I'm out of place, like I don't belong in their world." Tamara reached over and squeezed his hand, her touch steady and sure. "Marcus, no one gets to define your worth, not them, not anyone." His heart eased a little as he looked at her, the woman who had stood by him through everything. I guess I needed to hear that. We've been through so much together, haven't we?" Tamara smiled softly. "We've made it through because we know who we are, Marcus, and that's what matters." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the familiar comfort of each other, Marcus knew she was right. No one could take away the strength and resilience he had built over the years, and he didn't need anyone's approval to prove his worth. As Marcus parked his truck in front of the shop, the familiar hum of the city seemed far away. The lights inside the repair bay were still on, but the world felt quieter now. He stepped out of the truck, inhaling the cool night air, feeling the weight of the day lift from his shoulders. The public confrontation, the apology from LeBeau, none of it mattered in the end. What mattered was that Marcus had found something far more important: peace within himself. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone, not to the restaurant, not to the people who had looked at him with judgment. He didn't need their approval. What he had built with his hands, with years of hard work and dedication, was far more valuable than anything a high-end restaurant or a fancy dinner could offer. Inside the shop, the lights cast a warm glow across the tools, the cars in various stages of repair, and the handwritten thank you notes pinned to the walls. This was his world, a world where respect was earned, not given because of what you wore or how much you had. Marcus ran his business with integrity, with honesty, and that was enough. As he looked around the shop, he felt content. His life wasn't defined by the standards set by others. It was defined by the respect he had earned from the people who mattered, his customers, his community, and most of all, his family. His worth had never depended on anyone else's approval, and he knew now that it never would. In the end, Marcus understood that real power didn't come from external validation. It came from knowing who you are and standing firm in that truth.